Welcome to the Writer Reads Short Stories. This is Stiletto's Luck, Part 1 of 4. Sheathed in a suit that shifted with the colors of a city night, Stiletto crouched in the shadows, looking very much like the other gargoyles on the roofline, but one sat far too close to the casement. Those he'd arranged to meet in the room beyond had been on time. They'd come as arranged, bringing no nasty surprises and no extras. But he wanted to learn something more about them before going inside. Such as why 4 of the pairs hadn't left as soon as they'd seen each other, and why their bodyguards had failed to check the window and make sure it was locked. Were they careless, or did they know he waited just outside? And why did they stray so far from their principals, each guard moving to the outer perimeter of the room, leaving their masters close enough to do each other harm before they could intervene? 3 had hired him to protect them from one of the others. 2 had hired him to investigate separate matters that now appeared linked, and he had approached one of the men acting as a guard with a proposition. Stiletto waited. The figures in the room grew restless. Finally, one of the 3 turned to another. A precision weapon, you said he was. I would have thought he'd have been on time. Perhaps he scries, another, Anderman, said, and his guard gave a sigh, breathing in and sweeping his arms wide before drawing them in as he exhaled. His principal watched as his protector settled into stillness. The others waited. No, the guard said, after 6 heartbeats of concentration. He did not say what else he might have noticed with his heightened sensitivity, but he moved closer to Anderman's side. No one scries here. The men in the room did not seem to realize the significance of the guard's movement. They relaxed. Then why did he invite us together if he wasn't going to meet with us? Now they thought of it. Stiletto watched as the bodyguards moved closer to their principals before he shifted onto the narrow ledge alongside the casement and opened the window. 3 crossbow bolts and 2 shards of magic parted the space he might have filled. You done? He called. Stiletto? A cautious call. So you did come, voiced exasperation, tinged with relief. It is scrying of a sort, Stiletto said, swinging through the opening. But why? Stiletto paused, studying the speaker. Lord Merle, heavy-set but more fat than muscle and a head shorter than himself. The lord's brown eyes were full of puzzlement, his pink face genuinely confused. His bodyguard glanced from Stiletto to the lord and interposed himself between his charge and the other men in the room. Stiletto caught his eye, and the man nodded, shepherding the lord closer to the room's perimeter. The bodyguard understood. A little late, perhaps, but better late than not at all. Lord Merle might know dyes and cloth and the best tailors in town, and he might keep his accounts with insight and precision, but he was none too bright when it came to politics. If this meeting went south, Lord Merle would be among the first to fall. No witnesses and all that. Stiletto had guessed it. The bodyguard's actions confirmed it. It said much that the man wanted his master to live. Stiletto turned to the others. You wanted to hire me, he said. It was not a question. He watched their faces. 2 showed more emotion than they should. Another hid his surprise, but not fast enough. The 4th showed no emotion at all. Stiletto continued. I must admit to being a little confused. At least 3 of you admitted concern about each other's motives, but... He got no further. Lord Merle's bodyguard had his charge out the door and away as poker-faced Lord Stannis attacked. Stiletto sidestepped, ducked, drew both blades, and parried a second attack from Stannis's confidant, Lord Crestani. There are contracts on both your names, Stiletto told them. I only need bring them your heads. He watched as their bodyguards shifted into action, saw beyond as Lord Anderman's bodyguard parried a strike from Crestani's man in time to activate an emergency port and vanish the young lord to safety. Stiletto crossed Anderman off his list. That left the 3 main suspects. 2, he corrected, when Lord Dreyfus' bodyguard shoved his sword between his charger's ribs. Lord Dreyfus dropped, the inevitable question forming on his lips. Why? It went unspoken. His bodyguard and assassin answered it anyway. There's a contract on your name too, my lord. He pulled his blade free and took the lord's body by the collar. Dragging the body behind him, he quietly removed himself from the fight and out of the room. He raised his blade in thanks to Stiletto and pulled the door closed behind him. Proposition accepted. Yeah, thanks yourself. Stannis and Crestani smiled. Stiletto bared his own teeth in response. This was what he'd been made for. Stiletto had been raised a blade for hire. Slim and lightly built and standing just under 5'8", he blended with any crowd. He worked as a spy, a thief, a bodyguard, and an assassin. His father had taught him to fight with the blade he was named for, and then other heavier and more practical weapons whenever his mother wasn't looking. His mother had been a Puritan. They'd named each of their children for a weapon, and mother had expected them to specialize in using that weapon alone. His father had insisted that specialist did not mean limited to. That had only been the second time he'd seen his parents fight. The first time had been when he was 7, and they'd finally given him a name. It's the name of a woman's heel, his father had protested. Funny, I've never heard the term used to refer to a man before. His father blinked, tried a different tack. He'll get no contract with a name like that. He'll get plenty, his mother had answered. It hadn't helped that his mother had been right. No one will take him seriously, his father argued. Being underestimated is an advantage. Not always, mother, Stiletto thought. Sometimes it loses you a contract to be seen to be a boy when your client is expecting a girl. It was a good thing he'd learned the other weapons. He'd have been dead a dozen times over if he'd only carried a stiletto as a caravan guard. Dead tonight, too, if he relied only on his skill in weapons. Stiletto bent to avoid a sweeping blow from Crestani's sword, used his own blade to turn the dart thrown by Stannis' guard, and drove his boot back to catch the side of Stannis' knee and drive it in a direction it was never meant to go. He followed the Lord's collapse, neatly stepping into place beside Stannis as he hit the floor. He could afford no mercy, so he drew a small glass ball from his trouser pocket and let it drop. It shattered with a bell-like tinkle, followed by a spray of golden sparks trailing golden threads. They arced over Stannis, encasing the Lord in a fizzing cocoon even as he rolled out of Stiletto's reach. The next ball Stiletto drew held a faint gleam of blue. Crestani's bodyguard saw it and seized his charge by the collar as Stiletto flicked it through the air. The man let go of his charge, but Stiletto's aim held true, and Crestani jerked beneath the sudden wash of azure lightning. He dropped to the floor, and his guard was an eye blink too slow. Blue tendrils arced out and touched flesh, pulling the guard under a hissing blue veil. The magic drew the eye, contrasting with the gold surrounding Stannis. Too much. Stiletto lost sight of Stannis' bodyguard for an instant, and if a shift in the shadows dancing on the wall hadn't alerted him, it might have been an instant too long. Steel tore through the sleeve of his suit, compromising the magic, but not enough to destroy it. Shelldark, Stiletto said, turning as he drew a leaf-bladed throwing knife from his belt, ducking as he flicked it out with his fingers. The bodyguard's blade sliced through empty air above him. Dark smoke trailed in the throwing knife's wake, and Stiletto continued to turn until he faced the still open casement. He was aware of the knife hitting home, the bodyguard's startled cry, and the start of an acrid stench. He was aware, but he did not pause. Driving his feet hard against the floorboards, he took 2 strides to gather himself and gained the momentum he needed. Behind him, the stench grew stronger. Scratch the Lord Stannis and Crestani, he thought, and scratch one demon insertion. Damn. Damn them all, the way I am now damned. He bounced off the balls of his feet and arced his body through the window, aware of the howl rising on his heels, becoming aware of the danger he now faced. If he did not find the ignition point, the hells would gain a toehold and insinuate themselves too firmly to be rooted out. Contrary to what his parents believed, and in spite of what his father had taught him to be, this was why he had become an assassin. Dawn found him shivering high above the city streets, his spirits lifting as the sun's light touched him and worked against the morning chill. Stiletto had not wanted to risk a fire after the skirmish of the night before. There were those in the hells who knew him by sight, and more than a few who could make windows from flame. Better to risk freezing and falling than to be caught by the likes of them.